Clint's Reptiles is absolutely right. This iguana is the best pet lizard you could possibly keep, but if you do, you'll probably go to jail. This morning, I got sent a video about Fiji banded iguana, as well as about an expo, but they talked about Fiji banded iguanas, and by they, I mean Clint's Reptiles. Clint is a friend of mine, I like him a lot, and before I knew him, I knew of him and watched his videos, and he's a great content creator. In that video, he said that this is probably the coolest lizard that there is, or something along those lines. Something, emerald tree skinks are still better, or whatever he said. I'm pretty sure if an iguana walked up to Clint and gave him $1 million in a briefcase, he would still say emerald tree skinks are cooler, but these are cooler. But the crux of that part of the video is, although this is the best pet you could possibly own, you can't keep one. And by you, I mean the 76% of my audience that lives in the US. Well, not legally anyway, but over here in Canada, this is completely legal. But to tell you why they're the best pet lizard, to make my case, I need to tell you why they're objectively cool. Not why I think that or why Clint thinks that, but why so many people might think that. First of all, there's 4 different species of Fiji iguana, and I have 2 of them. This species is the Brachylophus fasciatus. There's also Brachylophus bula bula, or the Fijian or Central Fijian banded iguana. Both are really darn similar, to the point where for the first 3 years I had this animal, I said Fiji banded iguana every time when really it's not. I knew that, but they're so similar, you might not know the difference. The other 2 species are the crested Fijian banded iguana, which you can't really get unless you win a lottery. I mean, they are tens of thousands of dollars if you can find them. And the other one is the Gao banded iguana, but I don't know of any of those that are in captivity. So of the 2 species, you don't need to win a small lottery to afford. They're both found only in parts of Fiji. In fact, the Tonga banded iguana, we think by our best estimation, they were never in Tonga until about 8,000 years ago when people brought them over. And in fact, they're from Fiji, also just a different part of Fiji than the central banded iguana, and that's why they're different enough to be different species. Because of the evolution, not because they're not from the same place exactly. And something really cool too, in the vein of Clint's Reptiles, he would do this sort of thing. There is actually a 5th species, but this species is long extinct and likely was about the same size as a cyclura and might have also been terrestrial instead of arboreal, like the 4 that we know about now. Also, they're critically endangered. Now, this is a cool thing because we actually have them in Europe and Canada. I know I sound like I rub it in all the time. Truly, I wish that you guys in the States could have them too. I'm gonna go over the CITES and why you can't have them, which is a giant question I get so many times. But they are a critically endangered species, and although I don't think that me breeding them in my basement is eventually one day going to proliferate the species, at least we do have zoos and other types of facilities that have a backup colony, so if they ever were to get wiped out, they still exist in the world, and I think that's pretty cool. Plus, also, the more of them that are in captivity, the lesser demand there is for people to bring them out of the wild, which is poaching and illegal, and never ever, if you suspect an iguana of being smuggled in, don't buy that animal. Also really cool, just objectively, never mind my personal experience, which is the whole point of this. I want to add my personal experience to Clint's video because I've owned these animals for about 4 years now. And that is their evolution was a giant mystery until this year. Earlier in 2025, we realized, or we concluded, that these animals likely drifted over all the way from North America on rafts of sort all the way over to Fiji. Now this seems crazy because you look at the crazy distance that they must have had to travel. We're talking about thousands of kilometers here, about 34 million years ago or around then. And you think that's impossible, like what kind of a crackpot theory is that? But it turns out that this happens not all the time, but regularly enough that we have seen it with primates and other species where you have a group of animals that may be a tsunami or some natural weather event, or maybe not a weather event at all, but they get stranded adrift on a raft of sorts, dead vegetation and leaves and trees and things like that, and then they drift for long periods of time. I did a whole video about that, which you can watch up here, but to summarize, these animals, likely there was tons and tons and tons of them, or at least a population that was big enough that they could then proliferate a different island completely, and there was likely enough food on that raft for them to be able to sustain themselves during the journey. And that species that we think they are most closely related to, or the one that we know of anyway, are desert iguanas, which are found in the southwest of the US. Isn't that freaking crazy? Now, if you're thinking they look nothing alike, well, look again. Their heads look pretty darn similar. They do kind of look alike, but of course, it's been 34 million years, whereas things like, say, tree monitors, for example. Tree monitors, the theory is all were part of the same species or maybe very similar species, and parts of Indonesia like this weren't really separated like they are now. And therefore, once the sea levels had risen enough that they were far enough apart over thousands of years, the black tree monitors became black because they needed to. The evolution dictated they be that color. On Batanta, the blue tree monitors needed to be blue. On Mazul, the yellows needed to be yellow, and so forth. So we see this type of thing all the time where a same species or a very similar species then over time becomes very, very different, like the Fiji banded iguana is from the desert iguanas. Of course, I am not an evolutionary biologist, and Clint could explain this way better than me, but in a nutshell, that's about it. And objectively, I think they're about the perfect size, but I think at this point, we're just getting into my personal experience. And in order for me to say they are the best pet reptile, I think that for most people, it has to be a suitable pet. So from my experience, here's why I think that. They are very docile in nature. This animal, I didn't put a ton of work into. When I first got him, he was a little bit skittish because the breeder didn't really work with him, but this is an animal that I handle once every 2 weeks, maybe once a week. I'm not handling him every day. I don't do extra work. My handling process to tame him down was literally to pick him up and let him crawl all over me. They aren't apt to bite in any way, but generally I would trim their claws. This guy actually needs a claw trim, which is why I'm not letting him just sit on my shoulder like I normally do with the bearded dragon. These things will rip you apart. In fact, a lot of the videos you see like irritation on my neck, it's usually because I put him on my shirt and he crawled up my face and my neck and my head. And there's a reason they have those claws, but before we get to that part, which is cool too, they aren't flighty and they're not just going to jump into the abyss. These animals will jump from perch to perch, but generally they're smart enough to look first and make sure there's a perch there, where there's so many reptiles out there, crested geckos, I'm looking at you, that'll jump first and then ask questions later, which can, result in injuries sometimes. These guys aren't going to jump out of your hands or off of your head in general. I mean, there are exceptions, of course. They're not going to try to run away from you too much. I mean, he's going to get squirmy halfway through the video. We've been filming for, almost 20 minutes now, and now he's finally like, put me down, please. But the reason that they have those incredible claws is because they're an arboreal animal. And not only is it cool that they're arboreal because you can have really cool display enclosures, but also they are diurnal. And arboreal diurnal reptiles, if you haven't noticed from behind me with the frilled dragons and the tree monitors, are my favorite type of animal because you get a really cool display enclosure, which in my opinion is half the fun of reptiles, is to look at them even when you're not handling them, which is why they have those crazy, crazy claws, because they need them to be up in the trees. But also being in a diurnal species, that means that they're going to be out during the day. So if you're somebody who doesn't like to stay up all night with your reptiles, this might be the perfect lizard for you. And even if you don't want to handle them all the time, watching them move around, they're very active. So if you give them a big enclosure, I personally have this pair, him and his girlfriend Martha, in a 4 foot by 4 foot cube, which is this many gallons. So they're always moving and eating during the day and then breeding too if you give them that opportunity. But if you want to watch your lizard and see their natural characteristics and their natural behaviors, that is where you're going to see it during the day. And to do that, it's really, really simple. Put yourself a UVB light, give them a basking light, give them the right substrates, and all that stuff is super simple thanks to today's sponsor, Chewy. Chewy's been with me all this year, and to say thank you guys for watching, we've started the cyber deal, so right now there is so much. If you want lighting for an animal like a Fiji banded iguana, right now it's buy 3, get 1 free from Arcadia. Feeding insectivores, get 25% off hornworms when you buy Flukers. Flukers is also buy 3, get 1 free, and there's 20% off on Zoomed right now. So whether you're looking for enclosures or tongs or feeders or lights or substrates, there's something to celebrate for the cyber deals on Chewy right now. And that's another reason I think they're such amazing pets, is because their diet is amazing. As you know, obviously, because ChatGPT and Google will tell you they're herbivores, except for they're not. That's cool to me. I like omnivores. These animals eat very similar diets to bearded dragons. Of course, I would say I feed about 15 to 20% of their diet insects and 80 to 85 plant matter, but this means that it's easy. You don't need to go buy bugs all the time, because although they do eat bugs, they don't eat a ton of them. So you can get crickets once a week and feed a worm here and there, and that's kind of it. And the rest of it you can get literally from your garden or the grocery store or wherever you get your vegetables and leafy greens and things like that. And it's fun to watch because these guys will, I know people say they're herbivores, Adam, they're just eating the crickets because you offer them. No, I'm telling you, these things will hunt. You got your own tail? Their tail is so freaking long. These guys will hunt insects more voraciously than anything else that I own, including the tree monitors, which are incredibly intelligent. To me, it is so much fun to watch them go after a mess of insects when you throw in a few crickets here and there, and then they'll sit down and chow on their salad too. I love that behavior. Plus, the obvious thing is the size of them. They're easy to control. Even though I haven't trimmed his nails in nearly long enough, he's definitely missed a nail trimming or two, he's kind of cutting me up. But once you clip their nails, they're easy to control, but they're not delicate. So there's a lot of other great lizards out there that are more delicate, but these guys are pretty robust for what they are. They are from snout to vent less than a foot, but then their tail goes on for what seems like a mile. Easy to see from an enclosure, even across the room, but not hard to hold on to, and you don't need a mansion of an enclosure for them. I do a 4 foot by 4 foot cube, but you could definitely get away with something a little bit smaller than that. And the obvious is their color. Now, this animal is very blue, and although we try to do as best we can for the camera, I mean, if we're doing a color grade, Matt, just turn it off for a second. Look, this is no color grade directly from the camera. So blue. The reason that I named this one Frankie is because he looked like Kool-Aid to me, and apparently the Kool-Aid guy, his name is Frankie. Even though he's red, but he looks like blue Kool-Aid. I don't know, you get it. Whereas with Martha, his girlfriend, she is a female, so she doesn't have that coloration, just like so many other animals where the males are gonna kind of peacock with their colors or other types of displays, and females will look more drab because males are the one that are trying to attract a mate and females kind of get the pick of the litter. Same thing with these guys. So the males will actually change color. Not change like from red to blue, but if they're blue and green, they might get more green, more blue, more pronounced, fire up, kind of like a crested gecko does, but in my opinion, even more dramatically. In all of these shots, there's only 2 males that I have. This is Frankie, and this one is Snoop. So it's not a 20 different animals that I'm showing you. They just look like 20 different animals because the color changes so much that they'll look like a different animal day to day or minute to minute. I used to, in this room, have Frankie on one side and Snoop on the other, and because males will change their color when they get angry at each other or aggressive towards each other, because males do that in the animal kingdom, their color will change within seconds. It's crazy to watch, which is another reason I've got the Fiji in the other room, because it causes stress and I don't want that. But the crux of that video was you can't have them. It's illegal for you to have them if you're in the States, which is true, and there is no way around it. Sometimes I'll see in the comments, well, a buddy's friend's dog's cousin's sister has one, and it's totally fine. He's friends with the sheriff. Okay, no, that is not true. They're a CITES Appendix 1 animal. What that means is, even if they are already in captivity in the US, you can't sell them to a private person, to a private collection. You have to have credentials in order to keep them. Places like the San Diego Zoo and several other zoos. And this is why a lot of the times, if there's overbreeding or breeding too much, which please explain to me how to do, I am trying to breed these, they will literally freeze the eggs because there's nowhere else that they can sell the babies and they can't take care of all that many of them. Now this seems crazy because it's a critically endangered species, but what else would you do with them? Well, I mean, you could just use common sense and classify them in such a way that you could sell them to private collections or more collections or give more people credentials. But no, we don't want to do that. So the question, why can't we have them but you can? Well, it's CITES 1, and that just dictates that I can't, even though I live very close to the US border, I can't bring them across with me or I go to jail. I can't sell them to you. Europe can't sell them to you, but Europe and Canada, they can. It's kind of silly. Basically, once it was established, there just was no legal Fiji iguanas in the US in private collections. And in fact, a lot of these zoo collections, a lot of those animals were smuggled in and confiscated. Maybe not a lot, but definitely some of them. So Clint was right. This is the coolest lizard you could possibly own. And keep in mind, I own a lot of other cool lizards. I keep frilled dragons, I keep tree monitors, and although those are a very close second, I would say these little tree monsters are the coolest lizard out there. And unfortunately, for most of you, you can't have them. But you can hit subscribe and watch the videos because I do show these guys an awful lot, and on Instagram too. I want you to tell me in the comment section below what lizard you think is the coolest and more people should appreciate.